My children have been threatened. An animal was beaten, senseless to death. One cat was skinned. Another one was hung that happened to belong to a neighbor of mine. I'm going back over some time. Just this very week, a call came through the San Francisco temple from this area, evidently saying they were going to get my children at 12 o'clock, knowing that my children were home. We made the reports. We made the reports to the San Francisco law enforcement people. Our church has been threatened to be dynamited. We are in a violent era. It disturbs me. I know it's probably no more in America, or certainly in Ireland, but if we don't do something about this anarchistic tendency, I think it'll break the spirit of this great republic.
Now, you mentioned the violence to animals. Were these demonstrations that were put on out near your church or at your church?
You see, formally not having our church properly guarded, which we now have it guarded night and day, 24 hours a day, they got into the animal shelter and did this brutality to animals, senseless brutality. I'm overwhelmed. I'm speechless that people would take their vengeance out against me by hurting little animals or threatening my 8 adopted children, the several adopted children I still have in my home, or others. The threats are incredible. I don't seem to mind who they threaten. They called the rest home, where it's a self-managing. We believe in a kind of innovating program, one of our senior citizen homes, where the older people run their own affairs, do their own cooking, and only call on us, our nursing personnel, and other professional people, as resource people. And then, of course, we do the heavy domestic duties. We have a lady there by the name of Mrs. Letourneau, lived at that time. You've probably heard of the Letourneau families, a very prominent Caucasian family. They called up and threatened this woman by name, an 86-year-old woman, threatened her. Now, this is absurd. If they have an issue with me, I'm a fearless individual. I'd be glad to meet anyone and talk differences with whatever their opinion, however hostile, if they would sit down as the old prophet said, Isaiah, and let us reason together. But this is ridiculous, and it's horrendous that they can threaten innocent people all around me. And all I'm guilty of is presenting my views as I see them. And I think we're guaranteed that, as last I remembered, by freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and our right to our religious convictions.
Right, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm hoping that through our conversation we could shed a little bit of light on the situation and perhaps help some people to understand. Maybe we could do some of that if you could give us a little bit of your background, perhaps, how you happened to come to Redwood Valley, where you came from. I think people, well, I'll speak for myself, I know a little more than rumors.
I see. Well, as for instance, we were supposed to have been run out of Indiana. We came to this area because, as you've noticed in recent articles, the Los Angeles Times, for instance, carried quite a coverage of the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and that they have open cross-burning meetings in our city. Having adopted minority children that were fathered by servicemen abroad, as well as Caucasian children, a multiracial family was under constant threat. But contrary to being run out of the city of Indianapolis, the statement of the editorial of the Indianapolis Times, Scripps Howard paper, on the week of my departure was, the Reverend James Jones will be sorely missed as Executive Secretary of the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights. He was hired after a long search. He was superb. He went about his job diplomatically and thoroughly and produced the greatest results possible. We received an editorial also in the other paper, which is a much more conservative paper, The Star, which did pick up Mr. Kinsolving's part of his articles, not, of course, knowing his sources again. His sources were totally unreliable, and he went to the degree of sending on his information there. But we have the best relationships with the leadership, ecumenical leadership, the community leadership of Indiana. We came here with the hope that California, having Indians here, all racial groups, and pretty cosmopolitan mixture, that we could have some peace. And I'd lived in the inner city, being a governmental employee, as well as a pastor. We had a ghetto church, that served 2,000 free meals to the poorest of people for 13 long years. And you might say we were tired from the battle, and my children, I felt like I somewhat had placed them on the altar of community service. So some of us, the principal leaders, decided we would like to relocate and establish our church here, not proselytize. No one in this community can ever say we've rapped on a door or gone house to house trying to win anyone. People who come to our church have come from the desperate world of drugs, and they've been rehabilitated. 140. Our people don't use drugs, even alcohol or tobacco. We've been told repeatedly from law enforcement up and down this state that once a person unites with our church, they've never had any trouble with the law thereafter. We're law-abiding people. If this world was made up of as good a people as we are, there'd be peace. There would be no alienation. We're inclusive. We have Jewish. We have Christians of all varieties. We do have blacks. Another fear is, of course, I hear constantly one of our local pastors who's been very supportive said, Jim, he said, it all boils down to one thing, the fear of the unknown, that every black person they see, they think's a member of your church. And indeed, I see a lot of black people in the community that I do not know. Actually, the Redwood Valley Church is 90% Caucasian. We have very few black people who have settled this area. Our black people are in San Francisco who have jobs that far surpass anything they could get here, and there's no intention of moving blacks in. The reason they don't want to move in, certainly they have the right to live here if they choose, but as this pastor said, a great deal of this is a fear. He said, it all boils down to that race question, that there's a fear that we're going to be blanketed with hundreds of black people. And I think we have 4 black business people here, and I think about 25 black residents. Now that's not hardly a threat to the community, but it's the unknown again. I understood one person who's an executive in the lumbering industry. He said they used to tell on the lumbering industry they were going to bring in 5,000 blacks, and that rumor has passed through down the years. And I really believe in being objective. I don't think there's any subjective thing in this, that much of this is this fear, because we are inclusive, that we're going to somehow bring in hundreds and hundreds of black people, which we would not do to the black people in the first place, and we certainly wouldn't do to the economic picture. We have enough of a depressed economic problem, and our people are gainfully employed. It's been hard to get jobs. We don't have a person that's a shirker in our midst. We're good workers, hard workers, and so our employers tell us we do a good job, but jobs are not that plentiful, so we have no intention of moving people in here.
From what you're saying, however, it seems quite clear that at the root of your controversy, your difficulty seems to be the racial issue.
I'm afraid so. I'd hoped America had grown up in these years of violence that we've seen, where a number of civil rights leaders have been killed, and there's been question that even maybe President Kennedy was killed because of that he was a man of peace. I would hope that this had gotten through, and indeed to pastors and churches here, it has. We've had, I would name names, but I don't want any more trouble. I've mentioned to you some of the individuals who've been supportive, but leadership in this community is not lacking as far as trying to bring understanding, but somehow it doesn't get to the grassroots. And then I think it's a vocal minority, because we have many supportive friends who make their feelings known, and I don't mean supportive in any material way. We get absolutely no outside help for our program, and from our funds, we've helped cancer societies, every kind of group that ministers to physically handicapped individuals. As the Chronicle just wrote a very good article saying that we were widely known and highly respected for our social services, and we reach out to community projects of other denominations even. We're very generous and charitable people, not to mention that we educate 109 of our own people, 2 of them now under total scholarship by our church in medical science, and then to think of the vast number we take care of who are senior citizens and children who we have guardianship for, who have not a penny of support, who are sent from troubled areas. But I think race, the unknown factor too, and that they magnify that every black they see belongs to our church, which is not true. And then the one person called me from a filling station and said a black person was very uncouth there. And I said, that black person doesn't fit any kind of description. Another one called me very hatefully a few weeks ago and said a black person was beating a horse. I said, none of our black people own a horse, and no black person that you described in my parish lives in the vicinity. So whoever this black person may or may have not been, it was not a member of People's Temple Christian Church. And so I think we fall prey to that. That every time a black person does something, and black people are just humans like Methodist, Catholics, Irish, they're going to be bad and good. So when they see someone do something that is obnoxious or antisocial, they immediately conclude that they're a member of People's Temple. And not once yet have we had a report of an antisocial act of a black person that was a member of our temple.
Can you give some indication of the size of the membership of your church?
To be accurate, I couldn't. It's a growing church, particularly in the metropolitan area. We have a vast membership in Los Angeles, about 2,000 here, I suppose, 3,000 in San Francisco, 4,000 in Los Angeles. We're an active church. We take care of our own people in the tradition of the Scripture that says, take care first of the household of faith. And we believe that the church, if it would do this more, there would be less danger of the increasing tentacles of big government and bureaucracy. This frightens us. Now, some people think of us as I think, again, a conspiratorial, communistic group. We've had people call up commie lover, we're going to kill you, this, that, and the other. If they were any more anti-bureaucratic or big government or imperialistic, communistic, fascistic group than ours, I don't know how it could be. Now, indeed, we're utopianists in the terms of the Acts of the Apostles, where when they received their baptism of the Holy Spirit or their ineffable union with Christ, they shared in every way. But again, our people are not transferring properties to us. They're not willing us anything. We take offerings in routine ways. We have projects like every other church. And instead of taking from our people, we give far more than we take. But being that we are united and very supportive of each other, that attracts, certainly in this day of alienation.
I think, Reverend Jones, that's one of the criticisms, accurately or not, that many people seem to discuss, and that is that the belief that you're getting rich, or that if not you personally, then your church is somehow, from your methods.
Well, if we were getting that rich, you see, a church that is underwriting, we have one case where we had someone on dialysis. They had no funds. We've paid a hospital bill locally of one member who he isn't a member. He's not very friendly to church, but his wife was a good member. And he was generous enough to let her come to church and not give much money, really. But we paid an $800 hospital bill. We've paid veterinary bills. We've paid back rent of people who were some way even indirectly related to this church. We buy locally. We're a tremendous boost to the economy of this community. And generous, $5,000 went for charities, ecumenical charities, through Southern California last month. $5,000 through Dr. Irwin and the Christian churches of Northern California last month. Of $1,000 through Jewish welfare agencies. And then I said, we've helped retarded children. We helped a local couple I didn't even know, was on the front page of the newspaper, that was fighting for custody of a little child that had become like their own, and they didn't have legal fees. We didn't even bother. We just asked the local news media if they would channel it very quietly, or find out first if they would receive it, and we gave several $100s to help them in their legal battles. You would be amazed what we do locally. If we were to pull out of this community, there would be an economic depression, and a lot of people would be in hardship. We're not trying to accumulate wealth. We're service-minded people. Indeed, we have to have a backlog of resources in order to maintain 109 students. You don't educate 109 students in college on a shoestring. Neither can you take care of senior citizens who don't have any funds. We don't impose people to remain that way. If they choose to go on welfare, that's fine. But we have very few of our people in proportion. I would imagine we have less on welfare than any church of this size by far.
Maybe it'd be good to talk about the effect on the local economy. How many people did you say you have locally?
Well, in the total Redwood region here, and that includes some from Lakeport, I would say around 2,000 people.
considerable.
Good job supporting, and they buy locally. We run an ad in the paper a couple of Christmases to buy and support local businesses, and we do that, and we do it conscientiously. So I think if people woke up, if we were pulled out of this community, there'd be a terrible, terrible loss to a lot of businesses and hurt to the economy.
Are you having any thoughts in that direction?
Yes, I have anticipated it in the past, but I'm not a person to run under fire. The worst way to get me to, because you see our church's centers are outside. They're bigger in Los Angeles and San Francisco. I have contemplated it. Our people do not wish to. I would not dream of trying to move 2,000 people, no. But my headquarters may become more increasingly oriented towards a metropolitan area. But I would never move under fire, because that represents a trend. Other good people then would suffer accordingly. If bigots or even poorly informed people who are frenzied from their own fear and paranoia, if they can get they can achieve running people out that way, no good person is safe. So I don't work that way. I'd rather die than run under fire.
All right, Reverend Jones, our time has run out. Perhaps we can explore your People's Temple Church a little further next week when we continue our discussions. My guest this morning on Perspective has been Reverend Jim Jones of the People's Temple Church in Redwood Valley. This is Rob Pacini. Opinions expressed on this program were not necessarily those of KLIL, its staff, or our advertisers.
Listen while I tell you, here's a warrior mind. Stop, look, listen, see what you can find.
You've been listening to Perspective 73, a weekly look at the issues and events that shape life in our Redwood Empire. This program was produced by the KLIL News Department and was pre-recorded.
This is KLIL, Ukiah. Good morning. It's a minute before 11 o'clock. 61 degrees. Time now for the latest news from United Press International and the KLIL Radio Newsroom. Brought to you by the Manor Inn on North State Street in Ukiah. Edward Ure III, member of a prominent East Bay medical family, was found shot to death yesterday in his car, which was parked on an Oakland street. There was no motive and no suspect. He was the son of Dr. Edward Ure, who passed away in 1971, and the grandson of still another Edward Ure, who was Oakland City Health Officer and who died in 1965. Judge Matt Byrne has told Justice Department lawyers he wants new checks made to determine if any electronic surveillance had been conducted in the Pentagon Papers case.